Metal Gear Solid has consistently been considered as, not necessarily one of the most famous, but certainly one of the best video game franchises ever produced. Consequently, when Konami announced a remake of what many consider to be Kojima's magnum opus, Metal Gear Solid 3, everyone was enthralled. Then we get to me. I have never played a Metal Gear Solid game before. Not only that, I've actually, embarrassingly enough, never played a Hideo Kojima game before. At the same time, I think the situation applies to a lot of the people who wish to buy this game, and as a result, I believe that a review from this perspective will be important. With that being said, to those of you that have played the original Metal Gear Solid 3, I will be reviewing this from the perspective of someone who has never played it. Thus, I cannot really comment on the improvements or downgrades which this makes from the original. This is simply a review of the game as it is. On to the review.
They prefer to hunt alone.
First and foremost, we have the level design. Metal Gear Solid Delta is a linear stealth game. This should be kept in mind if you are planning to purchase it. In the modern market, all stealth games, including Metal Gear Solid 5, tend to be far more open-ended. Don't go into this expecting something as open-ended and replayable as a Hitman title. This is most certainly not that. However, you should also not assume that the game is a bad game just because of that. The game offers great stealth gameplay, all of which is adapted to the game's linear nature. Consequently, I never viewed this as being a problem. On the contrary, the linear environments excellently complement the camouflage and cure mechanics present in the game. That being said, the constant loading screens between environments was very annoying. This feels like something that would be updated in a modern remake, but it was not. However, the same principle applies here. If the locations were all in the same point on the map, that would make for a ludicrously difficult game. The autosave functionality of the game is also based on which zone you're in, and you will always start at the beginning of the zone even if you personally have made a save at another point, thereby preventing any save scumming. Thus, I feel obliged to give this 3 out of 3 for level design. There's too little to criticize to give it anything but. Next up is the controls. I played the game with a mouse and keyboard, though the game is clearly intended to be played with a controller. However, the game still felt very good to play and I never encountered any issues. The controls are completely reasonable. The legacy control scheme does suck, however, but I doubt that's the one you're going to be using for your playthrough. I'll give controls and responsiveness a 2 out of 2. As for the glitches and bugs, I have to admit I am impressed with Konami. I never encountered a single bug or glitch throughout my playthroughs of this game. Konami has clearly polished and playtested the game thoroughly, and I commend them for that. Performance, on the other hand, is a different story. There have been a lot of complaints surrounding the performance of this game. I'll admit that most of it is quite exaggerated, and I was able to get a consistent 60 frames playing on ultra settings most of the time, and my specs are not excellent by any means. At certain instances, there was a tiny bit of stuttering, but these moments were few and far between. However, the game is unfortunately capped at 60 frames per second. You can be your own judge of whether or not that will bother you. I'm a bit at odds for scoring this one here, but I think I'll give it a 2 out of 3 due to the performance hiccups. Don't get me wrong though, this is still a very polished game. On to the artificial intelligence. The AI in this game was effective and I never encountered any issues. They very well complement the camouflage mechanics of the game. Your outfit and your behavior will have a clear effect on how the AI will respond to you. On higher difficulties, they will detect you from larger distances. I appreciate how impactful the difficulty is on the AI. During boss fights, the bosses also had very good AI. They had highly telegraphed moves and a large variety of them to use. Artificial intelligence undoubtedly receives a 2 out of 2. Regarding the overall fun factor of the gameplay, this will be getting a strong score. Metal Gear Solid Delta has a variety of innovative mechanics which elevated above the average stealth game experience. The shall we say, most fleshed out of these is the camouflage system present. The camouflage system within the game gives you a percentage indicator based on the extent to which you blend in with your surroundings. The lower this percentage is, the higher the probability of an enemy discovering you. This mechanic is excellent. It's incredibly disappointing that this mechanic is not present in other games, because it's fantastic. It forces you to always be thinking about whether or not you have a better disguise to use. It also encourages you to look around and see if you can find more outfits. The boss fight with the end also makes excellent use of its mechanic, forcing you to stay in cover and avoid his line of sight. The two mechanics complement each other in a manner which is so beautiful that it makes this boss fight one of the greatest bosses ever. In fact, I'd argue this boss alone makes the game worth a playthrough. Not for that price, though, and more on that later. It's incredibly tense and suspenseful, forcing you to think tactically about each and every move. You also have to have precise aim, a good amount of food, and, of course, a near-perfect reaction time. The other bosses are all well designed, of course, though none match the greatness of the end. All of them are unique, have well-telegraphed moves, and pose a reasonable challenge, especially in higher difficulties. The other main mechanics of the game include the food system and the injury system. While both certainly unique systems, these are nowhere near as fleshed out as the camouflage. They are limited entirely to in-game menus, and while they are ones that you need to keep track of, I never found them to pose any sort of threat. I had so many medical supplies at the start of the game that I never had to worry about treating my wounds. The game also tells you exactly which resources to use, so there's not even any mental element to it. It's just a few extra steps. It's certainly better than simply having regenerating health, of course, but it doesn't do nearly enough for me to consider it an especially well-implemented mechanic. That being said, the injuries appearing on Snake's body until treated is a very nice detail. Moreover, the food is mostly the same, except you do definitely need to keep track of it. You will need to ration your food in this game, and you will need to hunt for animals to gain new food. This mechanic, while equally rudimentary, at the very least poses a challenge. Aside from that, however, the core loop of stealth and combat works greatly. As mentioned, the AI works very well for the stealth. Crawling through the grass while thinking about how to approach a situation is as fun as ever. And if your method fails, the combat of the game is surprisingly fun as well, even though it most definitely is not the intended way to play the game. However, the shooting feels great, and there's a fine variety of weapons to complement it. Overall, Metal Gear Solid Delta features many innovative gameplay mechanics, some of which are implemented better than others. However, its core loop remains a joy to play. Overall fun factor gets an 8 out of 10 from me. Thus, the total score for gameplay is a 17 out of 20.
Prepare for drop-off. Countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spread your wings and fly. God be with you.
Starting off, we have dialogue. The dialogue of Delta remains as sharp, clever, and witty as ever. It is often very well written and can evoke many different emotions. However, with some of the historical details, it can get very expositional, which does get frustrating considering the amount of time occupied by it. It can also be a bit too sentimental and dramatic at times, particularly towards the ending. Thus, I'll give dialogue 1 out of 2. Next up are the characters. This game contains excellent characterization through and through. All of the characters are complex, often far more than you think, and undergo significant development throughout the course of the story. This characterization makes all of the relationships feel very real, and it makes the game even more suspenseful, as you do grow to truly care for every single one of these characters. Obviously, I'm giving characters a 2 out of 2. On to the acting. The acting in the game is solid throughout, no pun intended. All actors deliver their voice lines very effectively. For my personal tastes, I found David Hayter's gruff tone to be a bit exaggerated at times to the point where it slightly diminished the believability of the story. However, it's certainly not enough to dock a point. Acting gets a 1 out of 1. As for the replayability of the story, I think Delta remains strong. The story contains a full ranking and scoring system at the end, which does serve as a catalyst for all achievement hunters out there. Additionally, there are different difficulties, all of which have significant effects on your ability to play the game well. Lastly, you also have the option to play the game in Legacy mode, which switches the game's third-person camera into a more traditional top-down view. This makes the game much more difficult as you cannot see the enemies in front of you. From my experience, this led to many instances where I was detected and I could not even see who it was that detected me.
Who's that?
Boss fights are almost unplayable in this mode due to this specific issue. However, there are changes to the menu and the title song that come with it, and other details. Although it is far from the ideal way to play the game, it undoubtedly merits a playthrough. As far as I'm concerned, replayability is a 2 out of 2. Now we have the atmosphere and mood. This game has a very tense yet surprisingly light-hearted atmosphere. It's difficult to put into words, because it is very much an oxymoron. The game is extremely tense and suspenseful at times, but can also crack some great jokes. The tone of the game is perfectly balanced. Look at the bosses, for instance. They all have superpowers which are completely exaggerated, and yet they never made me lose any believability in the game's story. Kojima treats the characters so normally and with such finesse that I never felt the need to question them. He perfectly balances them with the more tense and realistic atmosphere of the game. As this game so expertly juggles two contrasting tones, I feel it's necessary to give this a 3 out of 3. Finally, we have plot quality. Anyone who's played this game knows exactly what it's receiving here. And truly, that's it. I would never want to spoil this game for someone coming into it blind. I went into it blind, and I'm so glad I did. All I wish for now is to be able to do so again, because my god, what a story this is. It's a highly complex plot that is filled with many intricacies and twists. It never fails to surprise you even until the last minute. And, thanks to its excellent characterization, all of those twists evoke a substantial emotional effect. They are all extremely effective. I'll say nothing more here for fear that I will drop some spoilers. This is, without a doubt in my mind, a 10 out of 10 for plot quality. Thus, the total score for story is 19 out of 20. Well done, Mr. Kojima.
You're pretty good. Pretty good. I've caught you at last. We are the sons of the boss. I am the pain. I will guide you to a world of anguish beyond your imagination. Let's get started.
Now this is downright painful to do. Such a fantastic game that has to be brought down because of corporate greed. Oh well. Metal Gear Solid Delta is currently priced at a whopping €79.99. I mean, this is by all means a phenomenal game, but it is a remake. A remake of a game that can be bought for €19.99 on the same website. You have to ask yourself, is Snake vs. Monkey really worth €60? I mean, it's a great and fun mode and all, but the thing is, that's mostly it. The only other thing you can do in this game is replay the story. It is very replayable, so it's got that going for it, but it's only 12 hours long and you won't be seeing anything new in it. I know that Fox Hunt is allegedly releasing this fall, but I will be judging this game based on what its current state is, and its current state is ridiculous. €60 would have been the bare minimum price for this game, and even that's a stretch. This game is single player only, mind you, but €80? You might as well burn your money. I should also mention that for €10 extra, you can get a few skins. They're fun, I suppose, but very overpriced. I did not get them, and I'd advise you to do the same, because they're very pointless to have. Well, I feel as if I've fully discussed pricing, but there is also the content label for this category. Let's see, what do we have instead of the main story? Oh yeah, Snake versus Monkey.
You said monkeys?
It's a fun distraction, you can get some decent fun out of chasing high scores in it. It's got some humor, which I like. It's certainly a nice break from the emotional roller coaster of the story. There's also the Guy Savage Delta minigame, and it's actually really fun. Very short, obviously, but very fun nonetheless, and an excellent distraction. I genuinely don't know why Konami put so much effort into this, because this clearly must have taken them a lot of time. Time which could have been spent on, I don't know, the multiplayer mode. Nevertheless, I'm still very glad it's here, as it is surprisingly well implemented. Okay, now I have to score this game's content and pricing out of 10. And this gets tough. I think with all the playthroughs of the story you could possibly do, the average player will be sitting somewhere around 20 to 25 hours of playtime, maybe more with the multiplayer. I do think 0 is a tad too strict here, as I would probably have accepted a more typical €60 price tag. I also think 1 is a tiny bit too low, as I was really positively surprised by Guy Savage Delta, and I do hope Konami puts that amount of effort into Fox Hunt, which I am looking forward to. So I'll give content and pricing a 2 out of 10. I think that's reasonable. Well, I'm sorry we had to end on such a low note, as this is a very well-made game. If it's ever on sale for around €40, I would definitely recommend it. If that never happens, I very much recommend purchasing the original on Steam, as from what I've heard, the differences are, for the most part, minuscule. When Fox Hunt releases, I'll make an update video on that and see if my score for content and pricing changes with it. Overall, Metal Gear Solid Delta received 37 out of 50 possible points, which is converted to a B. Aside from that, I thoroughly thank you for watching and wish you a good day.